So today we're going to work on the thighs. And today to work on the thighs, I want to work around the circle of the thigh. So we kind of have 4 parts, but I'm actually going to describe right now 6, because I like to think of it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to the hip. So we're going to start down at the bottom behind the knee. So behind the knee, we have the popliteus. That's one that stands alone. Kind of works on the knee flexion and extension, the locking mechanism of the knee. So that's the one. We'll start right there because that's also where the hamstrings attach. Then there's the 2. On the outside of the thigh, we have the IT band as well as the tensor fascia lata. So the little tensor fascia lata muscle that sits inside the IT band. So that's 2. Then we go from the side of the thigh to the back of the thigh to 3. We have 3 hamstrings. Then we go from the back of the thigh to the front of the thigh to the quads, 4 quads. Then we go to the inside of the thigh. That's 5. 5 main adductors. Then we go to 6. And 6 is, we have 6, the deep 6 hip internal rotators. So I like to think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that kind of, we can work up that way and get through all of those components. So today, because we're covering a lot of territory, I like to use a little bit of a bigger tool. So for the first part, I'll use a regular therapy ball behind my knees to encourage that kneeling and free up the hamstring tendons and that popliteus release. So I'm going to actually use my plus size therapy balls for that. And then I'm pretty much going to stick to today my alpha ball. When I want to cover a lot of territory, I like to use a larger tool. But today is one of those classes where pretty much with almost everything, we could use the foam roller too. And if you use a foam roller, it covers broader surface, so it covers more territory and therefore would be less intense. So if you have a foam roller might be a nice tool to use, especially if you are more tender. And then, so I'll have my foam roller nearby because I'll show you the different modifications for that. And then my alpha ball and my plus size balls. And then I'm also going to use a block today. For ease, I'm going to stay on the floor to do my hamstrings. So to get into the hamstrings, I'm going to just stay on the floor just like this. But if you've practiced with me before, a lot of times I will cue to sit down in a chair to do the hamstrings because it's just probably the easiest way and the most accessible way to do the hamstrings. So if you have a chair nearby, when we get to number 3, you can sit in the chair to do your hamstrings. And I'll just use a regular therapy ball for that one as well. So let's begin. We'll start at the top with number 1, working on that locking and unlocking mechanism behind the knee. That's the popliteus. And to do that, we're just going to come into a child's pose with the therapy balls behind the knee. So behind the knee, the gastroc soleus and the hamstring connect like this in this really tight interlocking way. So when it straightens and when you put tension on it, it really pulls. So this helps gap that space to unlock. And I'll recommend coming towards hands and knees and then coming towards child's pose here. And all we're going to do is just arrive and sustain some compression here. Maybe you rock your hips side to side. Or maybe you just pause in stillness and arrive into the practice. Arrive into the sensations of the body.
Take a moment to pause and ask yourself, how am I doing today? Taking about 8 to 10 breaths here. If the balls are too much, another modification would be just to place a blanket behind the knees, and that will really help assist that opening of the knee joint too, without providing too much compression. Take a few more breaths. And then walk yourself up. Remove your therapy balls. And then just sit back onto your heels and notice the difference. How you can sink a little bit more here. And so now let's move right on to number 2. We'll go right to our side, and coming onto our side, you have a lot of options. You can stick with the 2 therapy balls stacked one on top of the other, a little bit bigger. But this is also a really nice place to use your foam roller. And so we're going to come into the IT bands. You choose whatever tool you'd like to use at the moment. I'm going to stick with my Alpha Ball. I'm actually going to take my foam roller and put it under my head for a nice little neck support. And I'm just going to bend my knees up and down just a little bit so that I go across the end, transverse friction or cross friction massage the bottom of the IT band. Then I'll arrive at a point of sensitivity. And my favorite way to mobilize through the IT band and the outside of the leg is with pin and stretch, with bending and straightening the knee. Because where most people feel caught up by the IT band is when they're walking, when they're straightening their knee, getting up from a chair, going up a step, walking. So it's with this bend and straighten movement that sometimes the IT band can catch, pull on the knee. So this is my favorite method. And you might even feel a little noise in the knee as you do it. And you choose the tool and you choose how much weight you put in. So the more you lean back, the less weight there'll be in the tool. And the further from the body, the less pressure there'll be. And then as you're ready, move the ball up a little bit. If you have a ball, you can go up and down over that outside, going across the IT bands. And then when you find that just right spot, maybe just pause and melt, feeling your body become heavy. And it's, as the body becomes heavy, it starts to soften, and you'll feel the hardness of the tissues just become a little bit more viscous, and you might feel this spreading out as those myofascial structures release. Or you can choose to bend and straighten again. Like I said, the foam is great for this too if you're really sensitive, because it's a much broader tool. Or if the balls are a little too hard, take a blanket, put a blanket over them, and that will soften them up. And then slide the ball up again. And as I get closer to my hip, I'm feeling more sensitivity, So I'm just going to pause in stillness and breathe here. No method is better than the other. The most important method is to be kind to yourself, to listen. What does my body need right now in this moment? And be curious about all the sensations that arrive. So meeting them with curiosity and kindness so that you can welcome them without creating a guarding, a bracing, or a pulling away. The most important thing is to be able to lean in and meet yourself right where you are. So maybe that's stillness, maybe that's bending the knees up and down, or maybe that's straightening out the knee. And for me, it's a bit intense here. And then release. Let's remove the ball and then just roll to the other side, passing through your back. As you arrive on your back, just let your legs flatten out for 1 minute and notice if you feel a difference between the left and the right, how they rest on the floor. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. This is just our first quarter really of the thigh. And then I'm going to switch sides so that you can still see me. So let your head rest. Like I said, I'm using my foam. And then take your therapy ball just above the knee to the outside of the IT band, at the very bottom of the IT band. You could also use your double therapy balls here stacked vertically or your foam roller. And I'm just going to start exploring. I like to start away from my knee because when I start further away, it's a little less tender. So I'm just going to go across with a little cross friction action. And then pausing and changing that mechanism by pinning and stretching. So bending and straightening. And if it's too much to do both legs, one leg can kickstand and just that bottom leg could bend and straighten, especially if you're using the smaller set of balls here. The smaller set of balls are really oftentimes really tender. And if you find yourself at any time efforting, so pulling away or bracing and guarding against the sensation, just pause. And then start to find another spot when you're ready, moving the ball up more towards the middle of the IT band. As I move the ball up, I feel a little bit more tenderness. So I'm just going to meet it first with stillness. And then welcome the sensation so that I'm not bracing or guarding. So I have the therapy ball on the outside. Did I freeze? Can you? The therapy ball on the outside of my thigh and going across. Audio is distorted. Okay.
How about now? Is this better? Sorry, I'm so sorry about that. Better? Okay, nice, thank you. Okay, great. It was just a Wi-Fi thing. So we're on the second side of the IT band. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. So on your side, that ball is now about mid-thigh. I'm bending and straightening my knees to go across the IT band if that feels right. I'm straightening and bending, kicking if that feels good too. And as you move up, if that top leg wants to kickstand to meet the weight, that works as well. Meeting yourself right where you are. And then even just pausing and melting into the ball. No way is better than another. So find what works for you and then find your way right up towards the top of the thigh. Leaning back a little bit here, the more you lean forward, the more weight there'll be on the ball. And as you lean forward onto the balls, it might be intense, you'll find yourself guard. So find that just right spot. And as I get higher, I like to just pause. And as I pause, letting my weight fall into the balls, I start to feel those tissues begin to soften. It's like those tissues start to become more viscous. As we bring awareness and attention to them, it's like they're heated up so that they become a little bit more fluid and start to respond as we bring awareness, as we welcome the sensation. So see if you can let the legs just be heavy. Great. And then go ahead, release the balls from the side. And now we're gonna come back up to sit. So that was number 2. We did behind the knee, number 1, the popliteus, number 2, the IT band and the tensor fascia lata. Now we'll get into 3. 3 will be our 3 hamstrings. And like I said, my favorite method to do the hamstrings is to actually sit in the chair because the chair makes it really easy, really accessible. But today I'm just going to do it kneeling. Kneeling is great too. So I'm going to take my block, place it just inside my left calf. And I'm going to take a therapy ball. And I have it on the middle height. And I'm going to take that therapy ball right into the hamstring. And I'm just going to slide around on it. I'm going to go a little bit side to side, across, feeling myself go from one muscle belly to the other. And sometimes when I sit like this, my knee even lifts up. And that's okay. So the knee can lift up on the floor to place the weight on it. I'll just show you for a second. If you're sitting, you can do a little bend and straighten. If you're sitting in a chair, get that pin and stretch of the foot. I don't encourage sitting on the floor and rolling with an extended leg, because then that puts too much pull or tension on the sciatic nerve. So that's why sitting is a really nice option. You can mobilize the sciatic nerve between the hamstrings without putting tension on it. But if you're sitting on the floor with the legs straight, then you're going to have some tension on the sciatic nerve. And I don't want to encourage any nerve symptoms. And then move that ball up a little bit more towards the middle of your hamstring. And you can sway the hips side to side. Or if it's challenging to sway the hips, if you're sitting in a chair, you can swing the foot like a pendulum. And you can even bend and straighten your knee. Creating, that's like a nerve glide actually, which is actually a really great functional way to stretch the sciatic nerve. And then move the balls up again. Now you should be in the upper hamstring, just in front of the ischial tuberosity or the sit bone. And as you arrive here, let's use the pelvis as the driver. So the hamstring attaches right to the front edge of the sit bone. So when the hamstring is tight, it's going to pull you back into a slump. So allow yourself to come towards that slump, but then pull yourself out of it, tipping the pelvis forward, sticking the tailbone back, and you'll notice you'll feel a little pull right where the hamstring tendon attaches to that sit bone. And this is most often where we injure the hamstring. So mobilize it by moving the pelvis now instead of the legs. So the hamstring is a two-joint muscle. It crosses the knee and the hip. So we can use both of those joints to mobilize through this group of 3 muscles. Take about 5 more breaths. Using whatever technique feels right. Can be pelvis moving forward and back, lower leg kicking, lower leg moving like a pendulum, or just pausing and softening. If you find yourself thinking too much or efforting too much, just come back to stillness, welcoming the sensation of where the ball and body meet. And as you're ready, let's switch sides. Coming lower in the hamstring, so towards the bottom, maybe third of the hamstring. Ball under the thigh. Finding a point of sensation. Hips can sway side to side. Or if you're sitting in a chair, moving the leg, the free arm of the leg makes it really easy. So use your techniques to use curiosity to explore the back of your thigh by bending and straightening your knee, by moving your foot in and out, or by swaying the hips, or even just resting in stillness. Wherever you are, listening to your body, using the sensations of your body as your guide. And then slide the ball up. Now you're towards the middle of the hamstring. First, just pause and meet the sensation of where the body and ball meet. Letting go of any guarding or efforting. And as you connect to the sensation, ask the body what it needs right now. Is it to bend and straighten at the knee? Is it to move the foot in and out, going across the fibers in a transverse massage? This is really helpful for freeing up that sciatic nerve right between the muscle bellies when you go across. Or is it just sustaining deep pressure, allowing time and gravity to facilitate release? And then as you're ready, move up, find one more stop for the ball just in front of the ischium now. So right in front of your sit bone, feeling that bony point. Right at the top of the thigh. And then using your pelvis now, the joint above the muscle, to mobilize the tendon of the hamstring by tipping the pelvis forward, tipping the pelvis back. The hamstring has a strong pull. On pelvic positioning. So the more awareness you have between the connection of where the pelvis is in space and the hamstring, the better you'll be able to control your seated posture, standing posture, using the right musculature to avoid injury. Hamstring injuries can take a really long time to heal. And most often it's right at this spot. Taking 3 more breaths in movement or stillness. And then release, remove the balls, and then just sit back onto your heels again. And again, as you sit back, if you're kneeling, if you're sitting in a chair, just feel how the hamstrings are a little more fluffy. You probably feel like they're broader on the floor, and you maybe even feel your sit bones a little bit more. And then if you come to kneeling, you really feel how the hips sink back to the heels now. Okay, so we did our group of 1, we did our group of 2, we just did our 3 hamstrings. Now let's move to our set of 4. Our set of 4 is our quads that sits in the front of the thighs. Lots of ways to do your quads. So quads tend to be really tender, and quads tend to be dominant compared to our hamstrings. When you look at the mass that the hamstrings fill, they're so much smaller than the quads. So the quads tend to be a lot tighter and a lot more bound than the hamstrings. Usually the hamstrings need strength. So let's loosen the quads now. Coming to your belly. Today, I'm just going to use my alpha ball. You could also use a single or double therapy ball if you'd like. The smaller balls tend to be a little tender, or if you just have the foam roller, you can always use the foam roller too. So the foam roller is going to be broader. If you use the foam roller, take the other leg up like a kickstand. So you have one leg in this half frog position, and then that's going to allow you to move nicely. But I'm going to come with my alpha ball, my softball-ish size ball, right onto my belly. And here I don't even I don't really even need to bring the other leg up, although I could if I want to do a lot of stripping. But I'm just going to use the stripping to explore. I'm going to explore the outside of the quad, the middle of the quad, and then the inside of the quad. I'm just in the lower third. I like to break these long bones, this femur, the longest bone in the body, up into 3 parts. And I'm going to pause in stillness. And when I find a point of sensation, I like to do as little work as possible, only as much as necessary. So I'm coming all the way back down to my belly. I'm not holding myself up at all. And I feel the pressure of the ball under my thigh. And I'm just going to start to bend and straighten my knee. You can also do this on the foam roller. You'll probably have to stay propped up on the elbows to do that. But just bend and straighten. I really love to just lie on the floor so I can feel the support beneath me. So I don't have to work or effort through this, that I can just lean into it and let time and gravity do the work. Oftentimes less is more. And then I finally freed up that bend and straightening motion at this point, allowing better glide and slide in those fascial tissues. And now I'm going to go across the quad. I'm going to sweep the leg in and out so that I can go across the musculature. I'm going to strum it like a guitar string in this cross friction way. So again, the foot's making that pendulum action. And then remember, you can pause in stillness at any time, just letting the weight of your body do the work. And then let's move up as you're ready. Taking your own time to explore the thigh. I'm just going to find another spot. So I'm going to kickstand my other leg for a moment just to explore for that just right spot. And there's one right there. And then I'm going to allow myself to come back down. And you don't even need to do that. You can just move the ball up with your hands and you can just reposition the ball. And then come back to the sensation of where the ball and the body meet. Come back to the breath, keeping a steady breath. If the breath becomes restricted, then you've put a little bit too much weight, a little too much resistance into where the ball and body meet. So back off so that you can maintain a steady breath, so that you don't facilitate a reaction of fight or flight, but that you can really rest and lean into this, and the body can then digest the sensations and allow you to work through them. Using the techniques of sustained compression or deep pressure, bending and straightening your knee for a pin and stretch, or what we call a functional mobilization, or going across the muscles by rotating from the hip with a cross friction massage. And then find one more spot in that thigh. Moving it up now towards the top third or so of the thigh. Grading the amount of weight you put on the ball by either propping yourself up with your elbows in your knee or just letting the body fall into the floor. For me,
I have a tender spot now. And now I'm providing myself a little tripod of support with my arms and my knee so that I can meet the resistance. And I can keep a steady breath, allowing my body to gently soften, feeling those fibers start to become more viscous, start to become more soft, welcoming the pressure of the ball. And then now I can allow myself to come back to the floor. It's going to look different for every one of us. And then release, removing the prop from this leg, coming right to the other side, taking the ball underneath the distal thigh on the opposite side, just above the kneecap. So you're right above the kneecap, coming to the other side now, using the other side as our counter, and then exploring the bottom third of the thigh in whatever way feels right for you. And then landing in a point of sensation. I'm going to allow myself to come back towards the floor. And I'm going to start exploring that sensation. First by softening the body. And then doing a little pin and stretch. And I barely bend to come to that first point of resistance. Really be sure not to push past through those myofascial boundaries. That you just meet each speed bump. And with repetition, every time you'll go a little further. With this work, we can hone our listening skills so we can understand our body better, so we can fine-tune our motions. So we can listen to what the body is asking for. Progressing the balls up the thigh. Find another spot more towards the middle of the thigh now. Once you can bend and straighten the knee, you can add a little rotation, see what happens when you rotate. You may even pause in that rotation or even bend and straighten in that rotation. There are 4 quads. So one on the inside or medial aspect of the front of the thigh, one on the outside aspect, one right in the middle, and then our long one over that spans both the hip and the knee joints, just like the hamstrings. It's 2 joint muscle. Kindly and with curiosity, inquiring into what the quad wants to tell you right now. You can move as little as much or as much as you'd like. And then find one more spot up higher in the quad. I'm going to bend my opposite knee just for a moment to get that little exploration before I land. And as I get higher, I come up because sometimes I have a little bit more internal resistance. So if I meet myself here and maintain a steady breath, Then the body starts to soften under the ball just by kindly bringing awareness to it. If I start to push, oftentimes you'll notice the body tighten up and the sensation will become a little bit more intense. And as I remain attentive to where the ball and the body meet, it starts to soften, and then I come back down onto my belly. We'll spend about 5 to 7 more breaths here. When you feel that release of the tissue, or maybe even it's a sigh of release, that's indicative of the body letting go. Allow yourself to come off of the balls altogether and just rest on your belly for a moment. Feel how the thighs are broad and almost have a sense of being deflated as they rest on the floor. Now that they're soft, more soft and pliable. Now we'll come into the inner thigh. I like to have a block near me for this. I'm going to stick with my plus size therapy ball, and I create a little runway for my thigh. Again, if you have the foam roller is perfect here. It'd go vertical, and then your inner thigh would go perpendicular to it. And here's your foam roller version of your adductor roll. I'm going to come to a more specific prop. So I'm going to use my alpha ball. Same exact position, bringing the inside of my thigh onto my block and ball. And then my pelvis starts to move forward and back to go up and down along the inner thigh. And I'm sort of half on my belly, half on my side. The more on the belly I am, the more weight I have into the adductor. And then just like with the IT band, we can go across in the opposite direction by bending the knee to the chest and bringing it down a little bit. You have 5 adductors. So now we're on number 5. And so we can strip across those, strumming them like guitar strings. And then if you'd like, you can even try that pin and stretch technique here. What happens as you straighten the knee? And again, don't try to go for a full straightening. That's not the goal. And then find your next ball stop. Again, we've been doing about 3 stops on each side of the thigh. The long bones require repositioning. And I really like, my favorite here is just to let my pelvis roll forward and pelvis roll back. The adductors can be really, really sensitive. And I may do a little up and down just to kind of floss my way in between the different adductor muscles. And if it felt right, you can bend and straighten. Although I find that it's not even necessary most of the time. I really feel like less is more with the adductors. They tend to be quite tender on a lot of us because they're very emotional muscles, very deep muscles, and often very neglected muscles. And then let's find one more spot. If you're feeling adventurous, you can take the ball right up to the groin, right at that attachment point of where the pubic bone and the inner thigh meet. And you can just roll onto that point, placing pressure right at the insertion of your adductor muscle. And as you arrive here, just pause. Sense where the body and ball meet. Breathe right into that point. And allow yourself to melt. And as you pause here, feel how the body becomes heavy. Notice how that initial sensation, maybe a sharpness or tightness or tension, starts to dissolve. And then ultimately, all that remains is the weight of the body resting on the ball with the sense of pressure. When you get to that point, let's switch to the other side. I'll spin around so you can still see me. So partially on your side, partially on your belly, taking your other leg up like a kickstand, like a half frog position. It's like you're sleeping on your belly, position at 4. And then start to slide the pelvis forward and back towards your belly, towards the side. Letting your body be your guide. So being a student of your body, listening to your internal teacher, asking what your body's looking for right now. And then you have options of going across and strumming those adductor muscles by bending the hip up towards the chest, or bending and straightening the knee with that pin and stretch. But I find so often that less is more. And then moving the ball up, find that next spot to lean into. I like to use the stripping in line with the muscles and a little bit of that cross friction just to reveal that perfect spot to pause. It's kind of like my surveying the area. And then find one more spot. I like for this last spot to come right up into the groin, where the groin and the thigh meet. And I just allow myself to lean over that ball, taking some deep breaths, allowing the body to become heavy. Noticing how first that sensation feels intense, local, right to where the body and ball meet. And then as you breathe, feel how the radius of that sensation begins to expand. Like ripples in the water broadening. The sensation starts to broaden in diameter and then starts to dissolve, starts to become diluted and dissolve. And then I'm left with the sensation of pressure between the body and the ball. And when you get to that point, remove the therapy ball, roll onto your back. You know, I went a little over, but I just want to do one more thing because I promised 1 through 6 that we would end in the hip. So we did all 4 sides of the thigh, and then we did the 5 adductors, and the number 6 was the hip rotators, the deep 6 rotators through the glutes. So let's just take 1 minute to free up those as well. So take your therapy ball on your back and just place it into one gluteal. All you're going to do now is sway the hip side to side, going across the whole back of the pelvis. Keep the whole body relaxed, just letting your body sway across the therapy ball. Hip sway side to side, like a hula type action, keeping the ball in one glute, exploring from the edge of the sacrum right out to the back of the hip. So we're with piriformis and all the others. And doing this sweeping action is a nice way to actually activate the gluteals. When we go a little quicker, we'll stimulate some proprioception and some activation so that we can then use our hips to stabilize ourselves better. And then those thigh muscles will work more effectively. And then take your ball to the opposite hip, from the back of the hip out towards the back, from the back of the sacrum, side of the sacrum, back to the outside of the ball of the hip joint. Sway along the back of the hips. Reconnecting to the sensation in the glutes so that we can use them better as we go from this practice back to our 2 feet. And before we transition, just remove all of your props, straighten your legs out on the mat. Maybe just do a little wiggle of your feet in and out, a little vibration to integrate what we just did. And then let the legs be really heavy, feeling the quads heavy, dropping into the femur bone, feeling the adductors, the IT band, dropping heavily towards the floor on the sides of your thigh. And feeling the hamstrings hang, dropping towards the floor. Breathe right into the core of your thighs.
Feeling your breath fill the whole circumference of the thigh as you breathe in. And then the heaviness in the legs as you exhale. And then as you're ready, when you're ready, you can roll to your side, coming back to sit. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm so sorry about the technical glitch. Please let me know if you have any questions.